Kylie Jenner didn't just sell lip kits, she sold a fantasy. And for a while, it worked. She was the face of a billion-dollar beauty empire, the youngest self-made billionaire, and the undisputed queen of influencer capitalism. But behind the filtered perfection was a fragile foundation. And by 2023, that empire was showing cracks so deep, Kylie was reportedly trying to buy back the company she once sold for $600 million. So what really happened? How does someone go from crashing websites with product drops to crashing their own credibility? This isn't just the story of Kylie's rise and fall, it's a masterclass in how the internet builds icons and then turns on them. In 2015, Kylie Jenner didn't just launch a product, she triggered a cultural event. At just 18 years old, she dropped her now iconic lip kit, a matte liquid lipstick paired with a matching liner, and it sold out in minutes. The frenzy crashed her website. Fans weren't just buying makeup, they were chasing access to the Kylie aesthetic. For months, they'd watched her lips transform on Instagram, mimicked her technique, tried to decode her formulas. This wasn't marketing, it was obsession. By the time the product hit the market, the audience was already pre-sold. And the numbers were staggering. In just 18 months, Kylie Cosmetics generated $420 million in retail sales. That kind of growth outpaced brands that had taken decades to build. Kylie wasn't just selling beauty, she was selling transformation. Every purchase was a ticket to becoming her. The look, the confidence, the aspirational dream she had carefully curated online. She didn't need a focus group. Her face was the campaign, her followers were the market, and her lips were the proof of concept. This was more than a business. It was the birth of the influencer to empire pipeline, and Kylie was its most powerful proof. It wasn't just about the product itself. It was about the emotional resonance it created within her audience. Kylie's fans weren't simply buying lip kits. They were buying into a dream, a lifestyle, a transformation that made them feel seen, heard, and included in an exclusive world shaped by digital fame. Every aspect of her brand had been carefully orchestrated to maintain the illusion of intimacy and accessibility, even as her profile reached astronomical heights. This strategy gave her unprecedented control over her audience's perceptions, allowing her to build a connection that felt genuine and deeply personal. But behind the filtered facade and social media perfection was a business model relying heavily on perception. The moment that perception began to falter, through product complaints, media scrutiny, or cultural shifts, the foundation started to show cracks. Still, the story was never just about Kylie alone. It reflected a much larger dynamic in the influencer economy, one where relatability is currency, and constant reinvention is the only way to survive. By late 2019, Kylie Jenner wasn't just a beauty mogul. She was a case study in modern entrepreneurship. And then came the moment that seemed to seal her legacy. In November, she made headlines around the world when she sold 51% of Kylie Cosmetics to Coty, a multinational beauty conglomerate, for a staggering $600 million. The deal gave the company a total valuation of $1.2 billion. Cementing Kylie as not just a media personality, but a business powerhouse. It was hailed as the ultimate validation. A teenage influencer had built something so massive, so influential, that a decades-old corporate giant wanted in. Coty promised scale, structure, and international reach. Kylie would retain creative control, while the company took care of operations, distribution, and expansion. It sounded like the perfect split. She could remain the visionary, while a global force handled the logistics. The world applauded the move. Media outlets dubbed her a genius. Other influencers looked to her as the blueprint. This wasn't just a success story. It was a new business model being born in real time. But beneath the glow of magazine covers and billion-dollar headlines, something more fragile was shifting. The very thing that made Kylie Cosmetics feel intimate, edgy, and fan-driven, Kylie herself, was now stepping slightly back. With Coty at the wheel, decisions were no longer fully hers. The product pipeline, the supply chain, the branding strategy, these were all suddenly shared with a public corporation beholden to shareholders. It was subtle at first, but fans began to notice a shift. The product launches started to feel a little more scheduled, a little less exciting. The packaging lost its edge. The vibe was no longer raw and direct from Kylie. It was polished, professional, and distant. What no one said out loud at the time was that selling half your company doesn't just change the business, it changes the brand DNA. For a product that lived or died on personal connection, That change was bigger than anyone realized. And as the months rolled on, it would become painfully clear that the deal meant more than a payday. It marked the beginning of something no one had expected: detachment. In May 2020, the image that Kylie Jenner had so meticulously crafted began to crumble, publicly, loudly, and with receipts. Forbes, the very publication that had once crowned her the youngest self-made billionaire, dropped a bombshell investigation that changed everything. The headline was cold and unforgiving: "Kylie Jenner is not a billionaire." The article went further than a simple correction. It was an exposé that accused Kylie and her team of deliberately inflating the company's revenue figures and submitting forged tax documents to maintain a billionaire narrative. According to Forbes, the data used to value the Coty deal had been manipulated, and the real numbers were far lower than what had been publicly reported. Tax documents reviewed by the magazine allegedly showed glaring discrepancies. What had once looked like a billion-dollar empire now resembled a carefully airbrushed illusion. And for someone whose entire brand revolved around transparency, glamour, and trust, this wasn't just a financial scandal, it was personal. The fallout was immediate. Public opinion turned. Fans, followers, and even fellow influencers began asking a dangerous question. If the billionaire label was fake, what else was? Was the empire itself more illusion than substance? Kylie responded swiftly and defensively, taking to Twitter to deny the claims. She insisted she had never asked for any title and had nothing to hide. Her legal team demanded a retraction, but the damage had already been done. The scandal introduced a crack in her brand's armor that couldn't be patched with a tweet or a photo op. For years, Kylie had been the ultimate influencer success story, a young woman who turned her online clout into a beauty empire. But now, that narrative was under fire. The press coverage didn't just call her numbers into question, it challenged the legitimacy of her entire legacy. Worse, the scandal hit at a time when public trust in influencers was already fragile. Audiences were growing tired of smoke and mirror marketing and hyper-curated perfection. The Forbes story didn't just knock Kylie off a pedestal, it confirmed what many were beginning to suspect: that behind the Instagram filters and luxury branding was a machine powered more by hype than by substance. And when your brand is built on being real, getting exposed for being fake is lethal. This wasn't just a reputational hit, it was a narrative collapse. And in the influencer economy, once people stop believing your story, they stop buying everything else too. After the Forbes bombshell, something changed in the public's relationship with Kylie Jenner. And it wasn't just about money, it was about trust. And that trust, once shaken, began to erode rapidly as fans took a harder look at the one thing that had built her empire in the first place: her products. Suddenly, social media was flooded with complaints. What were once excited unboxing videos became exposés. Lipstick wands arrived bent or snapped, packaging felt cheap, formulas seemed inconsistent. Some customers even claimed they had allergic reactions or received products that looked suspiciously different from what was advertised online. These weren't just isolated incidents, they were viral. And in the influencer age, one TikTok calling your product trash can outweigh $1 million ad campaign. But it wasn't just about defective items. It was about betrayal. When Kylie launched her infamous $360 brush set, she positioned it as luxury, something exclusive and high-end. Fans expected something worthy of that price tag. What they got, however, was shockingly underwhelming. The brushes felt mass-produced, lacked weight and quality, and even worse, it was soon revealed that they were manufactured in the same facility that produced ColourPop's far cheaper brushes. That revelation hit like a slap. If the premium price wasn't giving them better materials or craftsmanship, what exactly were they paying for? The Kylie name? The packaging? The illusion? Then came the Kylie swim debacle in 2021, and if the cosmetics backlash was a storm, this was a full-on flood. The swimwear, hyped as her next major fashion endeavor, was met with near-universal criticism. Influencers and regular customers alike took to TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube to show just how poorly made the pieces were. Stitching came undone with minimal movement. Fabric was so thin it became see-through when wet. Some pieces barely covered anything at all, making the swimwear not only impractical but borderline unwearable. And what made it worse? The silence. Kylie didn't address the criticism directly. Instead, she limited comments on promotional posts and gradually stopped promoting the line. The move didn't read as classy restraint, it felt like avoidance. Customers who had spent real money felt dismissed, like their concerns didn't matter. The core issue wasn't just that the products were flawed, it was what those flaws said about the brand. When your entire image is about quality, luxury, and aspiration, a bad product isn't just a mistake. It's a lie. And when fans start to feel lied to, they don't just stop buying, they start talking, loudly. What Kylie failed to realize was that every bad lipstick, every overpriced brush, every ripped swimsuit wasn't just a product complaint. It was a crack in the fantasy she had so carefully built. And by 2021, that fantasy was starting to collapse. By 2021, the problem wasn't just product quality, it was cultural relevance. Quietly and steadily, the generation that made Kylie Jenner a billionaire was turning against her. Not because of one scandal or one bad launch, but because Kylie herself had stopped evolving while her audience had moved on. Gen Z, the demographic that once hung on her every post, was entering a new era of expectations. They didn't just want beauty anymore, they wanted honesty, transparency, and realness. Gone were the days when a glossy selfie and a product tag could drive millions in sales. The new internet culture craved vulnerability, relatability, and imperfection. Platforms like TikTok weren't just changing how content was consumed, they were changing what content mattered. The raw, unfiltered videos shot in bedrooms and bathrooms were now outperforming polished Instagram campaigns. Everyday creators with messy rooms, anxiety confessions, and visible flaws were connecting with audiences on a deeper level than any celebrity shoot ever could. Kylie, with her perfect lighting and carefully curated brand deals, suddenly looked outdated, overproduced, inauthentic. The very thing that had made her aspirational, the perfection, was now her biggest liability. She no longer felt like one of us, she felt like an ad. And then there were her competitors, women who not only understood the shift, but embodied it. Rihanna's Fenty Beauty didn't just launch with a massive shade range, it launched with purpose. It said, "You belong here, this brand sees you." It celebrated diversity without performative optics. It normalized inclusivity, not as a marketing gimmick, but as the default. The result? Fenty built unshakable trust. Selena Gomez's Rare Beauty went in another direction, mental health. It wasn't about glamour, it was about connection. The brand spoke openly about Selena's own anxiety and depression and built initiatives to support others going through the same. Rare wasn't just selling foundation, it was selling care, empathy, and emotional safety. And it worked. In contrast, Kylie Cosmetics began to feel hollow. It had no message beyond the aesthetic. It wasn't connected to a cause, a movement, or even a deeper why. The product was always about her, and that used to be enough. But Gen Z no longer wanted to be Kylie. They wanted to be heard by Kylie. And that's where the disconnect exploded. Because when the audience grows up and the brand doesn't, loyalty dies. Kylie's Instagram posts, once magnets for excitement and admiration, began to feel like billboards, static, transactional, one-sided. The younger generation didn't see themselves in her anymore. And worse, they didn't want to. This wasn't just a vibe shift, it was a market correction. Influencer culture had reached saturation, and Kylie was the embodiment of its older model. Her approach was rooted in aspiration, but Gen Z was shifting toward identification. They wanted to relate, not revere. And if a brand didn't evolve with them, it became irrelevant. Slowly, subtly, and then all at once, Kylie went from trendsetter to relic. And the scariest part? It wasn't because of a massive failure, it was because she didn't change. Oh, and if you're all about the chaos and celebrity drama, make sure to subscribe and smash that notification bell so you never miss a single juicy update. Now back to the video. While the cultural shift was already dragging Kylie's brand through public perception quicksand, the data made it undeniable. Kylie Cosmetics was bleeding, quietly at first, then dramatically. In 2017, KylieCosmetics.com pulled in an impressive $68.7 million in revenue, but by 2022, that number had nearly halved, plummeting to just $36.2 million. Analysts warned it was only getting worse. Forecasts suggested the site's revenue could dip as low as $29 million by 2024. That drop wasn't just a decline, it was a collapse, especially for a brand that had once been considered a revolutionary disruptor in the beauty industry. And the most concerning part? These numbers fell during a time when most beauty brands were bouncing back strong post-pandemic. In other words, the rest of the market was thriving, and Kylie was slipping behind. Even Coty, the very corporation that had bought into her brand with high hopes and a $600 million check, was losing patience. Financial reports from Coty started to reflect growing frustration. Prestige revenues, down 4%. Consumer beauty division, which included Kylie Cosmetics, down 9%. In shareholder calls and press releases, executives were no longer shy about their disappointment. They admitted the returns weren't meeting expectations. They implemented cost-cutting measures. And while they never directly blamed Kylie, industry insiders didn't need the subtext spelled out. The message was clear: the golden brand was tarnished. Meanwhile, the digital signals, the ones that once amplified Kylie's power, were blinking red. On Instagram, her following stayed massive, well over 380 million, but engagement was stagnant or worse, declining. Her posts felt like they were reaching fewer and fewer people. The same glam selfies, the same product teases, only now the likes and comments didn't match the numbers. And on TikTok, the platform that had become the heartbeat of Gen Z culture, Kylie's beauty launches were getting outshined by smaller, newer brands with less polish but more heart. Her videos didn't trend. Her launches didn't land. The once unstoppable hype machine had slowed to a crawl. But numbers don't just fall on their own. They fall because people stop caring. And people stop caring when a brand stops evolving. Kylie Cosmetics hadn't offered anything new, bold, or culturally resonant in years. It was still selling transformation, but no longer delivering one. There was no buzz, no urgency, no conversation. And in the hyper-competitive beauty market, silence is the loudest red flag of all. What made it more painful was that this wasn't the result of one massive scandal. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Each missed opportunity, each underwhelming launch, each moment of disengagement slowly adding up to apathy. What used to be an empire built on instant sellouts and waitlist-worthy drops had become background noise. The data didn't lie. Kylie Jenner wasn't just falling behind, she was being forgotten. When a brand starts slipping, the one thing that can stabilize it is leadership. Clear communication, accountability, and a visible effort to reconnect with the audience. But Kylie Jenner didn't pivot. She didn't explain. She didn't engage. Instead, she disappeared behind the same curated perfection that had once made her powerful. And that silence? It made everything worse. Her response to the Forbes expose was defensive and dismissive. She fired off a tweet denying the claims, saying she never cared about the billionaire title, and chalked the entire controversy up to inaccurate statements. But for millions watching, that wasn't enough. They didn't want a tweet. They wanted receipts. They wanted transparency. They wanted a real conversation. And Kylie didn't show up for it. But even more damaging was how she handled, or didn't handle, the growing product controversies. When the $360 brush set was mocked as a glorified ColourPop dupe, there was no acknowledgement. When customers complained about poor lipstick applicators and leaky packaging, the brand went quiet. And when the Kylie swim backlash exploded across TikTok, with hundreds of women showcasing ripped seams, paper-thin fabric, and awkward fits, Kylie's team didn't release a statement. They simply limited comments. Promotional posts had replies turned off. Influencers who had received PR packages stayed quiet or avoided giving negative reviews. The silence wasn't just suspicious, it was insulting. In contrast, other brands were doing the exact opposite. Rare Beauty responded publicly to concerns about shade ranges and packaging. Glossy regularly engaged with customer feedback and implemented updates based on community input. Even smaller indie brands were openly addressing mishaps and showing their process of fixing them. Kylie, on the other hand, seemed to act like none of it was happening. And in a world where audiences demand accountability from their brands, especially those tied to real people, that approach backfired hard. Consumers started to feel ignored, even gaslit. They weren't just disappointed in the products, they were angry at how the company was treating them. Kylie's personal posts didn't help either. While customers were voicing outrage online, she was posting vacation photos, birthday parties, and new product launches, as if nothing was wrong. That emotional disconnect deepened the resentment. It felt like a slap in the face to those who had supported her from the beginning, no matter who had spent their money not just on makeup, but on the promise of a relationship with Kylie herself. If she couldn't even acknowledge their concerns, was she ever really connected to them at all? The real tragedy here wasn't the flawed products. It was the missed opportunities. Kylie had multiple chances to take ownership, to rebuild trust, to show that she cared about more than sales. A heartfelt video, a transparent product breakdown, even a refund program could have shifted the tide. But instead, she chose silence and detachment. The longer she avoided accountability, the faster the trust eroded. And in influencer culture, trust isn't something you can buy back once it's gone. It has to be earned, moment by moment, with honesty and action. By refusing to adapt her crisis playbook, Kylie made the one mistake her brand couldn't afford. She stopped being relatable. She went from beauty boss to brand robot. Still polished, still posting, but no longer present. And in a marketplace where your audience wants to feel like they matter, that absence was louder than any scandal. In a turn that felt more like a plot twist than a business headline, rumors surfaced in 2023 that Kylie Jenner was quietly attempting to buy back her company, the very same 51% stake she had sold to Coty just 4 years earlier for $600 million. At first glance, it seemed bizarre. Why would someone repurchase what they'd already cashed out on? But dig deeper, and it all started to make sense. Because what was once hailed as the smartest move of her career, the deal that turned her from influencer to boardroom mogul, had become an anchor dragging her brand down. The empire Kylie built was now under someone else's control, and that empire was falling apart. Coty had promised scale, structure, and global expansion. But what they delivered, at least from the public's point of view, was bureaucracy, watered-down branding, and a disconnect from the very fan base that made the brand so iconic to begin with. Under Coty's leadership, Kylie Cosmetics didn't just slow down, it started losing its soul. Longtime fans complained about formula changes. The packaging lost its edge. Product launches felt scheduled, safe, sterile. The spontaneity that once defined Kylie's brand, the sense that she was personally curating every drop, was replaced by quarterly sales targets and mass-produced sameness. It was Kylie Cosmetics in name only. So when reports emerged that Kylie was considering buying back her company, it wasn't just a business reversal. It was a form of damage control, a Hail Mary, a recognition that the only way to restore the brand's original power was to take back full creative control. But even that decision wasn't without complications, because buying back a company doesn't fix what's broken. It only gives you the tools to try. The bigger question was, would it work? Could Kylie reignite the same cultural fire she had sparked in 2015? Or had the world moved on, leaving her and her brand stuck in a version of influencer fame that no longer had a place in the new internet? And then there was the irony. The deal that was meant to be her billionaire moment, her peak, had become the beginning of the unraveling. The same $600 million that validated her status in business circles was now being used to try and undo the consequences of that very status. It raised a deeper question, one that goes beyond Kylie herself. Can influencer-led brands survive without the influencer fully at the helm? Is it possible to scale authenticity? Or is it inherently fragile, disappearing the moment it becomes corporate? Kylie's rumored attempt to reclaim her company wasn't just about cosmetics, it was about identity. It was about restoring her voice in a brand that had become muted. It was about returning to the formula that made her powerful in the first place: control, connection, and the illusion that she was still one of us. Whether she succeeds or not, the move sent a message to the industry. Selling out might get you rich, but buying back your soul? That's the real flex. Kylie Jenner's story isn't just a cautionary tale. It's a mirror reflecting the deeper truths about how modern fame, influence, and commerce collide. Her rise to the top wasn't accidental. She cracked the code of the 2010s influencer economy before most people even knew it existed. She sold not just products, but proximity, making millions feel like they were part of something bigger simply by buying a lip kit. But her fall reveals the limits of that model. And for every aspiring creator or entrepreneur watching her journey unfold, the lessons are crystal clear and absolutely brutal. First, let's talk about hype. It's addictive. It gets you headlines, it gets you investment, but it doesn't last. Kylie's initial success wasn't just big, it was blinding. The numbers were so outrageous, so fast-moving, that no one stopped to question the foundation. But hype, by nature, is fragile. It creates momentum, but not permanence. And once that momentum slows, the cracks begin to show. That's exactly what happened. The initial obsession masked the fact that the brand wasn't innovating, wasn't adapting, wasn't evolving past the girl on Instagram selling the dream. Without evolution, even the most viral brands start to feel stale. Second, the story highlights the paradox of authenticity. Influencer brands depend entirely on one thing: people believing you are real. That belief doesn't come from your follower count. It comes from showing vulnerability, from engaging honestly, from making your audience feel like they know you. And when Kylie sold her company, shifted to corporate operations, and distanced herself from day-to-day content and product storytelling, she lost that tether. Her fans didn't just lose trust in the numbers, they started questioning the person behind them. In a world that now rewards raw over perfect, curated luxury began to feel robotic. When an influencer becomes unreachable, they become unbelievable. And that's a death sentence for a brand built on personal trust. Third, the beauty industry itself has changed radically. What used to be a market of glam and sparkle is now a space defined by identity, purpose, and values. Consumers aren't just looking for pigment and packaging. They want alignment. They want to support brands that say something, stand for something, mean something. Fenty isn't just winning because of its product line, it's winning because of what it represents. Rare Beauty doesn't just sell foundation, it promotes mental health awareness and emotional authenticity. Kylie Cosmetics, for all its initial flair, never developed that next layer. It was a brand that remained frozen in the aesthetic that birthed it, while the market matured around it. And finally, there's the harsh reality of brand stewardship. Selling your company doesn't just mean letting go of operations, it means letting go of your voice. And in Kylie's case, that voice was the brand. Once Coty took over, fans could tell something was off. It didn't feel personal anymore. It didn't feel Kylie. The irony, of course, is that her attempt to scale her empire ended up shrinking her influence. The very thing she sold to unlock massive reach, her name, her face, her story, became diluted in the process. Now, with reports of her trying to buy back the brand, it's clear she understands this too. Some brands can survive without their founders, but influencer-led brands, they are their founders. And without that person's direct involvement, the emotional connection dies. What Kylie Jenner's fall teaches us is something brutally honest. In an economy built on attention, staying relevant is harder than becoming famous. It's not enough to start a fire, you have to keep feeding it. And while her wealth and status may never disappear, the power of her brand, its influence, its spark, its soul, will only survive if she can reconnect with what made it work in the first place. So here we are, at the end of one of the most fascinating arcs in influencer history. Kylie Jenner, once hailed as the face of a new business era, now stands at a strange crossroads. No longer the golden girl of the beauty world, but not entirely out of the game either. She's launched new ventures: Sprinter canned cocktails, the Kai apparel line, and a cosmic fragrance brand, all signaling that she hasn't given up on building brands, even if her original one is faltering. But here's the real question: can Kylie stage a comeback? Or has her moment passed, leaving her as a symbol of a bygone era of filtered perfection and algorithm-fueled hype? Because a comeback isn't just about launching something new, it's about understanding the new rules. And today's rules aren't about glamour, they're about grit. They're about showing your flaws, telling your truth, and letting people in. That doesn't mean crying on camera or exposing your whole life. It means showing that you care, that you're listening, that you're willing to change. If Kylie wants her audience back, she has to stop selling from behind a wall of curated perfection and start connecting like a real human being again. Her customers don't want a queen, they want a leader. Someone they can relate to. Someone who stands for something more than a name and a logo. To win back Gen Z, Kylie may need to lean into causes that matter: mental health, sustainability, social justice, diversity. Not just with hashtags, but with real commitments. Or maybe her path forward lies in evolving her audience entirely. Instead of chasing the youngest crowd on TikTok, maybe she pivots toward millennials or moms or even a luxury demographic who values legacy over viral relevance. The possibilities are there, but every path requires a reinvention. And reinvention requires humility. But beyond Kylie, this moment speaks to something even bigger. It asks us whether fame-built brands can truly go the distance. Or are they, by nature, designed to burn hot and fast, explosive in their rise, but temporary in their relevance? Kylie was the prototype. She proved the model worked. She showed the world that a teenager with a phone and a vision could build an empire that moved millions of dollars. But now we're seeing the full picture. That empire, like any empire, needs maintenance, needs meaning, and needs to grow with the people who helped build it. What's clear is this: Kylie Jenner's rise taught the world what's possible. But her fall is teaching us what's sustainable. Influence without connection fades, brands without soul crumble, and the internet, once your biggest ally, can just as easily become your harshest critic. Still, in every fall, there's a lesson. And in every lesson, there's a choice. So, will Kylie use this moment to evolve, or will she stay trapped in the image that made her famous, but can no longer keep her relevant? Comment whose side you're on. Is Kylie a victim of the system she helped create, or is she the architect of her own downfall? Can she reclaim her crown, or is this the final chapter in a cautionary tale the influencer world won't forget?